Welcome, everybody, to episode 4 of the Kraken Cast podcast, a podcast where we talk to people in the MMO industry, content creators, Twitch streamers, and everything in between. Today, we're going to be joined by Tirinei, a wonderful MMO streamer. If you're just checking out the podcast for the first time, make sure you take a moment to, if you're on YouTube, ring the bell and click that subscribe button. If you're downloading this off of Spotify, please consider downloading it. It would really help us out. Tirinei, welcome to the Kraken Cast. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest.
Thanks for having me.
Am I actually saying your name right? Is it Tirinei?
It's Tirinei, but I don't correct people if they say Tirinei because it's close enough. It's really fine.
Yeah.
I like to go by Tiri. Tiri's preferred,
Tiri?
But because it's easier for people.
Then we'll just go with Tiri for the purpose of the podcast. Again, welcome to the Kraken Cast. I'm just really excited that you were willing to be on and be a guest back when we were still doing the first podcast, but more excited to have you here on the new Kraken Cast.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. So just kind of starting out, I'd like to kind of talk about some basic, like getting into streaming, like where you kind of started at questions. So what really made you make the decision to hit the go live button? What made you decide, hey, I actually want to try out the streaming thing?
My YouTube community. So I used to make videos on YouTube. I used to do World of Warcraft news, and then I would upload gameplay from time to time. My cousin was my biggest inspiration because she'd been doing YouTube and other things for a really long time. And we had drifted apart and we kind of reconnected, and she sort of introduced me to the whole scene, not really intentionally like, hey, come over here and look at this, but I realized what she was doing and I thought it was amazing. So I started doing YouTube, and eventually I started getting comments like, hey, have you thought about live streaming? And I'm like, ooh, that sounds terrifying. I thought, maybe. So I looked into it and I thought it sounded awesome. So signed up for Twitch and started streaming.
That's really cool. It's also a lot of people who start out streaming usually start content creation journeys on kind of the other direction. They start out by streaming, and then as they're streaming realize, hey, I need to be building an evergreen community on a platform like YouTube or TikTok, somewhere where people can find my content all the time and follow me to Twitch. But you actually came into kind of Twitch with a community. So I think that's kind of an interesting path in to already have that built up YouTube community and move into streaming from it. Kind of gives you a leg up, I feel.
Yes. Didn't feel like it for quite a while, but yeah.
That's very fair.
Because that was in 2012. So that was quite a long time ago. And my channel was very small for quite a while after that. But I did have some people come over with me. I still have YouTube followers come over and be like, oh my God, I haven't seen you do content in forever. I didn't know you were here. And I'm like, I tried to make videos to let you know. But it's hard to get people to switch platforms.
Yeah, it definitely is challenging to get people to switch platforms and come on through. And you mentioned you haven't done content for a while. So with your focus when moving over to streaming, have you just primarily been focusing on streaming and not really making YouTube for a while?
Yeah, up until my son was born, I was still making the news videos, and then I would upload Twitch VODs. But when he was born, I didn't have time to make the videos I was making because I didn't have 6 to 8 hours straight to record and edit. It was so much work for the videos I was doing, and the experience. I'm self-taught, so it was like, I'm sure there were quicker ways to do it. But yeah, so I told everybody I was going to stop doing YouTube, at least the edited ones, until I kind of got my bearings with having 2 children, because he's my second and they're 2 years apart. And then I just never went back to it, and I still always feel terrible about it. I would never probably go back to making any sort of news or highly edited videos, but I keep trying to get myself to get in the habit of uploading things from Twitch, just to basically remind, or let people know in my YouTube community that, hey, I'm still doing content, type of thing. But I'm really bad about it.
Yeah, I think you nailed like content creation on the head right there, because it's basically, we only have so much time. And I really want to get into time later, because there's a lot of time that goes into this, outside of streaming to a certain extent as well, and all these other platforms. I want to get more into that, but I kind of wanted to just do a little more getting to know you first. And I'm just curious, like, if you met somebody for the first time, so you're at a convention, or you just mentioned, hey, I'm a streamer, how would you describe your style? Like, what's your like quick elevator pitch if anybody asks, like, what do you do on Twitch?
It's really funny you asked me that, because when I get asked that in real life, I'm never really sure what to say because most of the time I get really weird looks. Like I'm sure you understand. Like a lot of people don't know about, making content on the internet as, as a hobby or a career path. But when people ask me like about what my style is, specifically, if they're like, "Oh, you make content for Twitch. What do you do?" I just like hanging out and chatting with the community. I do a lot of chill things specifically so that I don't end up getting distracted and not interacting with chat. So, I play ESO and sometimes other games. I started out on WoW. Like I said, I was making WoW news. So it was World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14, then on and off ESO, and now ESO is my primary game. And I love it because there's so much in ESO to do where you're not like hyper focused on the game. Because I'm kind of a washed up WoW raider. I don't really care to do trials because I'm just kind of like, I've done so much of it that I'd rather just relax and farm and decorate houses and quest.
And that's really,
but interacting with my community is number one.
And I think that's a really strong part about what makes ESO different than other MMOs, but also makes MMOs really different from other games that are streamed. One, with Elder Scrolls, that has such a variety of content that is end game. Like you said, trials, basically the equivalent of raids in WoW, are end game content, but so is decorating a house, and the quests are so intense and well written. So there's so much you can do, and I think that lends itself to a different environment when streaming, because you can stream all those different things, but also, like you said, if you're focused on community, and if you're just doing like casual stuff, the community is still going to be there. And I think that's a kind of a really unique approach. And I think I've noticed a lot of MMO streamers, but especially ESO streamers, have that big community focus, and I think that shows through just due to the nature of the game a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
And along with kind of like getting into streaming, like you said, you started streaming a long time ago, been at the platform for quite a while. What was your like initial goals like, and like how was your like initial journey through those like first couple years of streaming?
My initial goals, just to get even just a small community of people to chat with about whatever it was I was doing, and just to make people laugh and entertain people and give people a place to hang out and have a good, comfortable, welcoming environment. Yeah, I mean that was my primary focus at the time, was just to. I didn't have the affiliate goal; it didn't exist. So it was like, yay, one day maybe partner, but that was like so out of my mind because I knew it was a long journey, or at least that it probably would be. But yeah, that's that was my main goal, was just to create a community where we could come and hang out, simply enough.
Yeah, and that's a great goal. And obviously, over time, you've really built a really well-established, really caring community, because that will follow you. Because like you said, ESO is your primary game, but I do notice when you switch to other games, we all notice like a dip or change when we go to other games. So it seems like you have a really high percentage, or if over the time have gotten to a point where you actually have a very good, solid kind of ride or die group of people that kind of will come with you when you try new things.
Yeah, it's been really nice. That group was very small when I streamed WoW primarily, but since I've grown and gotten to know more people in the ESO fam and the Twitch community, that group has grown a lot, and I'm really grateful for that.
And then when you were starting out, for me at least, I think it's really important. I had a lot of like inspirations, and obviously those change over time, and there's a ton. But did you have like inspirations you looked at to, whether they were other streamers? You started a long time ago, so it might not have been other streamers, but maybe content creators on YouTube, or even people in other forms of like media, like television or film, that kind of like inspired what you kind of developed as your style over time?
Oh wow, as my style, I can't think of anybody specific who inspired that. I mean, my cousin was my biggest inspiration because her being somebody that I know personally, I grew up with her. And she's extremely well known, and was before I even started on YouTube. And then that kind of carried over to Twitch. I'd say she was my biggest inspiration. Starting out, I can't think of anybody who's inspired me, but like a ton, like that's notable. But now I have tons of inspirations who I actually call friends and colleagues, which is such an interesting, unexpected development when switching to ESO as my main game. And that's just, it just attests to how amazing the ESO fam is. But you inspire me. Maddie inspires me. Luna inspires me. Medic. Lots of people. I'd hate to keep naming names and miss people, but there's so many people in the ESO community that inspire me now. Starting out, it was mostly just my cousin.
No, that's perfectly fair. And that's a really good thing to kind of bring up, because each directory is going to be a little bit unique when it comes to Twitch, especially different games, because different games have different, in my opinion, built-in communities. Like ESO has always, like, that's why I played it for so many years before as a streamer. There's always people that are willing to help out, teach me a dungeon, teach me a trial. Just playing around on PlayStation casually initially, the community was already there. The ESO fam was already there, and I feel like that carries through to the directory. And while it's not true of everybody, it's true of, I feel like, most people, especially established people in the directory, that people are, regardless of size, stature, time doing it, really open to interacting with each other. And it creates this really kind of collective community in a way, because in a lot of games, if you were, say, a 300, 400 average viewer streamer like Ninja614, he would be interacting with possibly different people than you would as, like, you know, a streamer when you were coming up maybe around like 50 viewers before you started to really rise. And it would kind of be almost segmented based on levels. Whereas in the ESO directory, I found it different. And you've been in the directory a lot longer than me, that people are willing to just like interact despite being a big streamer with a streamer who's just been doing it for a few months and maybe has 3 viewers.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my question there is, being somebody who did ESO, watched ESO, but didn't really come into the directory as a streamer until a little less than a year ago. Is that kind of always something that's been there? Or is that something that just kind of has developed as the community has grown in the ESO streaming directory, since you've kind of been there through a big portion of it?
It was about almost 2 years ago that I started more consistently streaming ESO. And I've noticed that very same thing. For example, when I streamed WoW, if I rated a larger, like a more well-known WoW streamer, I got like sometimes just completely ignored with a group of like 30 people, and like not even really a courtesy thank you sometimes. I'm just like, okay, well, okay, see you later. And it just kind of seemed like, okay, well, they're big, they're busy with like a busy chat, and they have a huge community. That I get it. And I just felt like that's how most people were. Not really how I feel, but. And then when I started streaming ESO, it was amazing to me how many people I would be watching, and they would actually look for smaller streamers to raid. Like a lot of them do that. And yeah, they raid each other to grow as well. Like we're all kind of helping each other grow by sharing our communities with each other. That's the whole idea. And we want to grow as well. But it was just surprising to me to see how many people are so willing to help out that smaller streamer. You know, all they get out of it is that, which this is one of my favorite things ever, by the way, the shock and the like excitement of somebody getting a big raid, somebody with just a few people. And they love that. And you know, that's what they want to help other people out. I kind of lost track of what your actual question was. Did I answer it?
No, that really was my question. I guess another part of that was like, is that something that you feel has always kind of been there in the ESO directory, or over the last 2.5 years has that like developed more? Like, is that like day one in the ESO category? Did you kind of recognize that, or is this like something that's grown and like evolved over time?
Since I first started in the last 2 years, I think it's been at least existent. I think it has grown though. I actually started in the ESO directory in during the beta, and it I had fewer people watching me then than I did playing WoW. Of course, it was a brand new game. It was still in beta. And I've played off and on for, you know, since then. I would go through a few months playing, a few months off, sometimes a year off. And then it was always kind of the same. It was like I didn't really know anybody. I didn't really see a lot of other people streaming in the directory that, like, I don't know, it was really interesting how like the last couple of years I'm like, holy crap, this is a whole new world since I played last. It blew up. Seems like to me from my observations. But I didn't used to have a lot of time to watch other streams either, so I had a hard time kind of developing that viewpoint beforehand, or before the last couple of years.
That's really fair. And I was actually going to ask that next. I was curious, like, obviously you've been streaming on Twitch for a very long time. I've been an active viewer of Twitch since near the end of like 24, like a very long time. Well before I even considered streaming. So I've seen a lot of different things. I'm curious if you were an active Twitch watcher at any point throughout that, or if you were mostly just a streamer. And then as you met other streamers, kind of branched more into viewing.
I was mostly just a streamer, and I always had this guilt, like I want to watch other streamers and get to know other people, and also you can learn a lot from watching other streamers. But because I think part of it is for quite a bit of the beginning of my streaming days, I was also doing the YouTube editing, and that took so much time, and working, and then streaming, and I just felt like I never had time to watch other people. I never even considered getting it on mobile for years. I don't even know how long the mobile app's been out. That's an absolute lifesaver for me. It's really most of how I can even watch other streams now. What's funny is I spent time watching WoW streams when I played WoW primarily once in a while, but I usually ended up not really having that much interest for very long, even though I played WoW. But ESO streams, like there's so many of them that capture me, where I have to have my phone sitting, somewhere on the kitchen counter when I'm doing dishes, have an ESO stream up. I don't know what it is, if it's the game, the community, or both. It's probably a combination of the two. But yeah, in the last couple of years when I started streaming ESO is when I really started spending time watching Twitch for any length of time.
Yeah, and you mentioned time there, and I think that's the thing, and we'll get into that a bit more later, which is the whole concept of watching Twitch is kind of part of the job, but you also have to work on editing videos and things like that. And you really also mentioned something there I think is always important to kind of bring up, which is watching other streamers is such a good way to kind of do homework, because while you shouldn't just like take what someone else does, because that just makes you a carbon copy, and why watch a carbon copy when you watch the original, you can see things they do. To steal a term from a really big streamer named Ludwig, the yoink and twist, which is, oh, they do something, I really like this is a way I can take that, make it my own, and adapt it to my style. And I really like that kind of aspect of Twitch, where it is being able to watch other people, interact with them, genuinely part of their communities, and then by watching them, like, kind of have your own ideas spark up and go, oh, they do this, I want to do something kind of similar, but this is kind of my take on it. I always thought that was really interesting about Twitch and even YouTube to a degree, where you're kind of learning from the community as you're growing in it.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from watching other streamers, for sure. Gotten ideas and twisted them to my own, style.
And yeah, and kind of going off your own style, for people who haven't been to your channel before, haven't had a chance to check it out before, a lot of your channel point redemptions involve morphing into other characters, be they dragons or valley girls and things like that. I'm curious, was that always something that you did, or is that something that like came with time, and what kind of gave you the idea and made you kind of like tilt into that being kind of your channel point redemption and a part of like the content you create for people?
So I never really had much interest in using it for streaming. When I first got the software, it was actually a gift from my sister years ago, like years before I ever really had a chance or took the time to sit down and use it. I never really thought about doing it until I don't know if it was soon after channel points became a thing, or the redemptions, because that wasn't that long ago, maybe around a year ago. I don't know. So what was the first one? Oh, I remember now. Okay, so I sat down to play with the software, and I thought, well, how am I going to use this? Maybe I should just randomly stream as a dog sometimes. But I already use a cam, right? So I'm like, that's weird, right? I don't know. Is that weird? And I did it one day. We were just playing around. I was just talking with the community about it. I was like, what do you guys think about this? And then I just like switched to dog, and people are like, oh my God, so cute. And we just kind of played with the different things that you can do with face rig. And I just was like, you know what? Maybe this will solve my problem of like, when would I use that? Why would I use that? If I just make it a channel point redemption, make it so that the community can tell me when to change into something else. So then, of course, as a WoW player who plays a mage, not as a main anymore, but well, I don't play anymore. But anyway, they have a spell called polymorphs. And so I'm like, let's make polymorphs for my channel. And there's stories behind most of them, but the dog was, it was just one I thought was really cute and just decided to try out at the beginning. So
yeah, I really love it. That's the first thing when I was going through different streamers channels and watching. I'm a prolific lurker. I lurk for a long time before I will ever say anything in somebody's channel. And they still lurk a lot more than I chat, but that's one of the first things I noticed is you doing kind of those transmogs, those polymorphs. And I thought it was really cool because there's a lot of really amazing people who are VTubers. They, you know, they stream with an avatar, and that VTubing's been growing more and more. And there's streamers who stream with a camera. And I really was like kind of enamored with the way that you were able to like interact with your community by basically having like face rig, having different VTube avatars. Even though you're primarily a streamer who streams live on cam, you've incorporated those elements that make, like, I think VTubing really fun, because like you said, the characters have backstories and personalities. So it really is incorporating this really cool VTube thing along with streaming. And I really thought that was like a really creative use. I hadn't seen anybody like dive in that way. So
thank you.
Yeah. And the reason I bring that up is you know, while we're doing these podcasts, people listening, a lot of people who like watch live and listen are people who are streamers themselves or might be starting out. And I really think that's an interesting idea. You talked about talking to your community about it and just kind of going for it. On my channel, I do dances and things like that. And I put up whole together scenes for dances. And for me, and I'm just curious if it's the same for you, when I have a weird idea, there's a tendency to second guess or go, people might not like this, or maybe I should crowdsource this. And I found that even if it's a bad idea, it's kind of like that adage, there is no wrong idea. The worst that happens is you do it and your channel and your community doesn't react at all. And you go, okay, I'm not going to do that thing again. I'm just curious about your philosophy on it, because I found that when I just dive into like the weirdest ideas or just try something, it can blossom into something, even if the idea seems weird or strange. And my brain's trying to tell me, don't do that, don't do that. If I just push forward, it usually can blossom into something magical. And I'm curious if you have a similar experience.
That's exactly what happened with the polymorphs. I was like, this is weird, right? To just like suddenly be something else. And then like new people that come in, they'll just be like, is she always a dog? Is she always a dragon? Does she always talk this way? And so, yeah, I definitely had the same feeling. Like, this, people are going to think this is super weird. And it turned into something that people really like and redeem a lot. So the biggest thing I learned from that is, if you think it's weird, if you feel in your gut that it could be something really cool, just try it, because that's where unique and creative ideas come from that can like make your brand, you know, and kind of build you as something and set you apart. Your dances are amazing, by the way. I know exactly what you're talking about, and they're absolutely amazing. Like, I could just feel the amazing vibe coming through the screen when you're doing them. I'm just like, this is great. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, the polymorphs, I'm trying to think if anything else was like that. I always have that fear when switching games, of course, but I think of the polymorphs as definitely the same situation where I'm just like kind of scared to do it. Like, what if people hate it? And yeah, it turned into something great. So
and yeah, and you mentioned a word there, and that's actually where I was going with it, is the idea of uniqueness and brand. Because if you have a bunch of people in the same category and they're playing the same game, what really brings people to watch you is the value you provide, whether it's community or entertainment or high-end gameplay or things like that. But at the end of the day, what keeps them there is the personality, and that's that uniqueness that you're talking about. And I think that's really important for people to remember, is like, you don't have to know what your brand is up front, but taking risks and trying new things, looking for things that you do that, you know, showcase parts of your personality, is a really, really important thing. Because at the end of the day, you can't control raids, you can't control follows, you can't control any of that stuff. All those things that people want, you can't control, but you can control your content. You can control how you build your community. And then when you do happen to get a raid or an opportunity and seize it, what keeps people there is that content. So I think it's really important to me to embrace that weirdness, that uniqueness that makes people special. And I'm really glad to see other content creators such as yourself who kind of do that same thing and really kind of set yourself apart and create like your own seat at the bigger ESO table, because it's a very welcoming table, but it's really nice to like kind of like, this is my space. This is kind of what I do that makes me just a little bit different from my peers and my other amazing creators in the category.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to go with anything you think is weird. The thing is, if you think it's going to be weird, it's probably going to be unique. And if I've learned anything, like, people there are a lot of people out there that are entertained by things that they think are weird too. There's that to think about as well. So keep it weird.
Yeah, I come from Portland and I have a lot of family in Austin, so keeping it weird is 100%.
That's their motto.
Yeah, that's been my that's the motto, so that's kind of how I've always lived life. But I think it's important for Twitch because if you think about content that you watch, whether it's on TV, YouTube, or Twitch, a lot of people watch things like maybe you watch documentaries for the knowledge of it. Maybe you watch things to like laugh or to be excited or feel something. So doing things that are unique and weird can give people that kind of interaction. But it's also unique on Twitch because we interact directly with chat. We get to talk to them in our Discords, in our communities. We get to know people, even if it's in a parasocial way at first, who come back to the chat. So kind of going back a little bit to community, I'm curious how your community kind of grew and how you kind of maybe took steps to shape it and kind of like the image that you envisioned for it.
My community has grown a lot since I've started playing ESO primarily a lot. That's when I got partnered. Before that, I wasn't even close to being partnered before I started streaming ESO. How I've shaped the community, I just always try to make sure everybody feels welcome. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of a way to answer that. Keeping good people around me for sure and utilizing their support. Because for example, Octavita, best mod, also helps by being so welcoming and awesome to people in the community. And now we have other mods doing the same, and just regular members of the community. Just hold on to those awesome people and cherish them. That's been something that's helped me a lot.
Yeah, mods are the backbone of any Twitch channel. Anybody I've ever talked to, any streamer, because mods are the people who know you, who have been around, who've grown with you, and kind of recognize what the community is about. And when you're not able to maybe directly engage with the community or notice something in chat or things like that, they're the ones who really make sure to kind of keep things in the same like track they've been growing. So yeah, it's always good. I'm shouting out like Noctavita and just mods in general, because they really are this I wouldn't say unsung, because a lot of streamers talk highly of their mods, but it's always good to just point out how important like moderations and mods are and how much of a backbone they are to like the content. Even if they're not the people always live on the screen, you're the one live, they're the ones who are really kind of helping support it.
Mm-hmm. And I feel bad mentioning names too. I love all of my mods very much, and I appreciate all of you so much.
And then kind of in the same vein as like community and growth and things like that is something that can be hard to do for some streamers starting out, or even if it seems easy to do, they can change over time, which is boundaries. And I'm just curious because we do form initially, like you can become really good friends with people from your chat. You can become good friends with your mods. The initial relationship is very one-sided. It's a parasocial relationship. You're the one revealing the sides of you want. You're the one in control of everything. You have this kind of position of power as a streamer, and people feel like they know you closely because of that, but it's kind of hard to initially know people. So I'm curious if you've run into what kind of things you've run into along the way that have made you shift your boundaries, or maybe like make sure you had your boundaries set in a way that you can like take care of your own like personal well-being and mental health, and not have people maybe draining your energy, or acting in a parasocial way that's kind of like overly harmful to the community.
I'm not sure how to answer that. Like boundaries in relationships, like if people, I'm not really sure how to answer that.
For example, just kind of with like boundaries, like for me, like I wanted to be like really open, and so my DMs were always open, my Twitch chats were always open, and they still are to an extent, but I kind of was always making sure to get back to people right away. So like I had put myself in this position where people would expect me to get back right away, and they almost feel like I was ignoring them if I didn't, and I had to establish a boundary and make sure I was like, hey, I do get back to people about these things, but it might take a few days. Like sometimes if I'm having days off, I'm not going to be responding to this. So that was like a boundary I had to establish. Other boundaries being like people trauma dumping and like saying things that go beyond what, I'm not a medical professional. So learning how to set a boundary like, hey, I acknowledge what you're saying. This is not the place for it. Here is some contact information. Yeah, I had to set a boundary.
Yeah.
So if people did that, so that's what I kind of meant by boundaries, just like these lessons that you might have learned along the way that like at first seem like really great, but then as you grow, you realize, oh, I need to kind of shift my boundaries and my access for my own like work life, family balance.
Yeah, I get what you're saying now. I was very, I don't want to say closed off, because I would sit and, I mean, starting out streaming, I would sit and basically just talk about my life, because you're talking to an empty screen basically at that point when you're first starting out. So I wasn't closed off per se, but I was, I definitely, I was a little, I came in kind of nervous about that, like personal interaction, one-on-one interaction with people, at least early on at all, because there were some stalking issues that, not me, other people that I know had, and it really kind of freaked me out, early on. And so I think I've always kind of been a little reserved in that regard. So I haven't come across really any issues. I'm a lot more open these days, though, just because I've built so much, the trust in the community and the people that, you know, I know I'm surrounded by people that mean well, and that, you know, we have Discord. Discord's a big help because we have a place where we can all chat when, you know, when I'm not streaming and stuff like that. And so I've avoided very many issues like that, social issues and stuff like that so far, because I had learned from other people's experiences in the past.
Yeah, and I guess that's a really good way, is like sometimes you have to learn lessons while you're doing it, but having paid attention to issues people ran into, you're able to like kind of pre-establish those boundaries. And I think that's a really good piece of advice for anybody starting out that they can take away from that, which is look at what other people have gone through, kind of do a little bit of research and homework, and maybe pre-establish going into it with more boundaries, so you don't find yourself in a position where you're uncomfortable and not sure how to maybe walk it back.
Yeah, exactly. Take your time, wade in, go in slow, and just kind of go with what you're comfortable with.
So kind of moving on, now that we've kind of really got a good establishment about like your channel, your community, and like who you are as a streamer, and we'll get into like a bit more about like time management, stuff like that. I do want to really talk about like the games we've been talking. We've been kind of skirting around it a bit, talking about, you know, World of Warcraft, moving into Elder Scrolls Online, and like looking at Twitch tracker and stats. You know, you played 3,461 hours streamed of World of Warcraft. You've streamed 3,027 hours of Elder Scrolls, and the third biggest game you've done it has been Final Fantasy 14 at 702 hours. So obviously, very much, despite, you know, you've done Valheim and Final Fantasy and some of these other games, but the meat and potatoes, the bulk of your content has been around MMOs. So we'd already mentioned like you already were creating YouTube content, you were already doing kind of MMO content, but as you were trying out different things, and you know, WoW was your primary, and then it became Elder Scrolls, what made you really just kind of like stick in the MMO space and not kind of branch further out?
I have this weird thing where, while I'm totally fine with spending hours playing solo in an MMO, I really enjoy the fact that I'm working on a character that I can play with other people. I've just always been an MMO person, since EverQuest to Star Wars Galaxies, then to WoW. I just, for some reason, it's hard to explain. I mean, I've played, you know, single player RPGs for sure, but I don't know. It's hard to explain why I gravitate toward MMOs, but I always have. It's the weirdest thing. I think it's that, though, like I'm working on something that I can play with other people at any time should I choose to. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That
no, I
makes
actually
sense?
really do know what you mean, because like even if you're in the middle of Final Fantasy, which has an amazing story, or you're in the middle of Elder Scrolls Online with its full voice acting and quests, like you can really just enjoy the game solo. And sometimes, you know, that's what I stream or do on my own, is just like a bunch of stuff. But the knowledge that I can share that with other people, that if I decorated an amazing house in Fallout 4, for example, I would have to go on a forum somewhere, or I would, you know, have to like show it off on stream. I'd have to go out of my way to be like, hey, I did this thing in the single player game. Where is when I build up and decorate houses, for just an example of one aspect of ESO and ESO, I can literally just have anybody come over and I can show my house over and over again, and it becomes a part of like what I've created, and I can have guests over and things. That just feels much more alive, and it feels like I am doing a lot of solo work, but at any time I can do it with other people, and I'm almost doing it to share with other people.
Exactly, yeah.
And do you kind of feel, and this is something I've thought about a lot recently, because the nature of MMOs, even when you're not streaming them, is about shared experiences, even if you're doing solo stuff, whether it's when you get to group stuff, whether it's raids or quests or RP or all those things, you're going to feel like that social experience of an MMO is what lends itself so well to streaming, because like a lot of games lend themselves to streaming in a way, but single player games, people generally have to move from a game to a game. You can't usually just main, say like, you couldn't main another game you've done a lot of hours in, but not main, or you can't main Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's only so many times you can play through that, versus you can always forever be playing MMOs. So I kind of feel like it lends itself to streaming in a way that's different from other games.
Yes, I absolutely agree. For one thing, if you know whether you choose to do community things or not, like people that do community things, there's that right there that makes it a lot more attractive to stream and to watch, because you know you could potentially have people come into chat all the time like, hey, what platform are you on, you know, thinking fishing out, maybe they want to join your guild and be a part of the community in game, and that's really cool as well. Earlier on, like when I streamed WoW, we did invite people from the community, but the nice thing about ESO specifically is that there's only 6 servers, and the likelihood of people being on yours is so high that it just tightens that community and builds it closer together, you know, in your channel. It stinks that we can't all be on one, but so that has been something that's definitely been reflected since I started playing ESO, is community-based stuff. Not that I do a ton of it. I do it once a week. Yeah. But yeah.
I guess I also kind of meant by community stuff is, even if I am just doing, this is something I learned was okay from one of my inspirations, Vandalia, even if I am literally just kind of walking around, smelling the roses and looking at pretty scenery and not really doing content because of the community nature of ESO, I don't, like in other games, if I'm just kind of like smelling the roses and walking around, people will probably like parse off and want to go somewhere where someone's doing the content. Whereas in MMOs, at least in ESO, I found my community doesn't like size shift really down or up. If we're just walking around grabbing like random resource nodes and having a conversation, they're there for it. If we're doing, you know, really difficult like VMA runs, they're there for it. And that's kind of what I felt about the community, is like, because it is a community, they're just kind of like, they love this game too, and they just want to interact with other people enjoying the game, even if it is sometimes doing almost no content for hours.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced that. I've experienced that as well. Farming streams, and sometimes standing around streams, sometimes running in circle streams. They definitely happen. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. There's something about ESO too that makes that even stronger compared to other MMOs I've played. I can't quite put my finger on what it is.
Yeah, that's I guess that's the kind of the intangible thing, is what makes it a bit different, because ESO is a very like giving community when new people are around, even if you're not a streamer, even if it's not online. Like I found I was very giving to people once I was established on PlayStation. People were giving to me before that. It was kind of a giving community, but I have done Final Fantasy, and the community there was very similar. But something about ESO just is unique, and I think any community is unique. But yeah, I've never been able to put my finger on it either. I was about to ask you why you thought that was, but you like me, can't quite put your finger on what makes it unique and different, but it is 100% unique and different.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like you said, it's an intangible thing. I can't quite figure out what it is. Get lost in ESO. Yeah, that's another thing. Sorry. That's another thing I wanted to mention. I'm fine with just running around anywhere in ESO, and I don't know why. I never ever felt that way in another MMO before, except for maybe not since EverQuest. And maybe that's why ESO is my main game now, because it gives me those vibes. Like I'm cool with just running around.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, I like the world. I like exploring the world because of the nature of the game and how it became after one Tamriel, where you can basically go to any zone anyway at any level. I just feel like I can just walk and exist in the world. Whereas when I did play WoW, because I originally, a couple other MMOs before that, but played WoW for a very long time, very top raid, going for world first, committed. WoW never felt like that. It had pretty zones. I was happy I could tell you what my favorite zone was, but I was never going back to that zone. I was never going back to Ungoro Crater after I got through Ungoro Crater. I loved Ungoro Crater, but there was no reason to return to it unless it was to farm a mat. Whereas ESO, I can just go to a zone I fully cleared and still feel comfortable just kind of riding around on my mount and just taking it in.
Yep. Same.
Yeah, that's not to say anything bad about other MMOs. It's just a thing I feel very uniquely connected to with ESO versus other MMOs I've tried.
Yeah.
So as somebody who kind of transitioned from, World of Warcraft as your primary to ESO as your primary, though again, you still have done World of Warcraft streams, you've done Final Fantasy streams. I'm really kind of curious. Have you ever really felt like since you do mix in variety and you do other MMOs, have you ever felt really pigeonholed? Have you ever had those moments where you feel like if you wanted to do something else, you couldn't, you had to like be in there? Because I know that can be a feeling some streamers get where they feel pigeonholed or like they have to do a certain type of content in ESO or they have to only play ESO or whatever game it might be.
I have felt that way very recently. The odd thing is I was pigeonholed into what I wanted to do more anyway at that time and still, but the thing that was making it not fun to be pigeonholed, obviously, to call it that, is the fact that I didn't want to leave my home in WoW. I'd been playing for at least a decade, since close to the beginning of Burning Crusade, whatever year that was. I always have to look it up. And I had been guildmaster for about, I think it was 9-ish years. I always say almost a decade because I can never remember, of a guild, which I raid led in while streaming for 7 of those years. And it was just like, it's a lot of my life. It's a big part of my life. And then when I realized how much I actually loved ESO now, over the years, things have improved to the point where just playing it, I was just like, I want to play ESO. Just had more desire to play ESO. And turned out that's what the people wanted. Only problem is I have a family in World of Warcraft that I started. I'm the guild master of it. And I found myself drifting away from them, not being a good leader. And that was really hard for me. And I still think about it and get sad about it. I've let my sub lapse now for like, I guess it's been almost a month, and it feels weird, but at the same time, I don't think about it much in the last couple of weeks, except for the fact that my friends are there. People I raided with on a weekly basis are not in ESO. A lot of them aren't. Some of them have, play both or have moved over. And so, yes, I was pigeonholed, but it was also what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? There was just things like pulling me back the other direction and making me sad. It's like, man, I really do want to play ESO and it's a whole lot better for my channel. Like all of these things are pointing toward it. But then there was like that sadness that like I would get onto WoW for once a week. I would still raid, trying to be a good guild master. And also I wanted to play with my friends, but that was the only thing I was interested in at the time, was raiding. So one raid a week, I had at least 5 people come in and be like, boo, wow. I'm like, sorry, it's just raid. We get raid every week. I'm sorry. So that was definitely my one pigeonholing experience that I can recall.
There's 3 things I really want to touch on there. The first one is, even though I left WoW a long time ago, I always kind of refer to it as my old college buddy. We shared a very important time in life, very memorable time. We have a ton of experience and things. And if I ever run into that buddy, even though I don't keep up on them, I don't know what's going on in their life. If I do hear about it, I don't want to hear that they're like, down on their luck or anything like that. So I always root for, other MMOs that I came from, because like you said, you have family there and you still have people there. For me, I don't, but I still I have so much good experiences that I want people that are doing WoW to still have a great time. I don't want it to suffer. And obviously in recent times, thanks to a lot of things going on with the sexual assault allegations and things like that, not to talk about it too much, obviously it is suffering. It's kind of sad to see like that game suffer in a way.
It is. It really is. And that was actually only like some people think, oh, did you quit because of that? And I'm like, no, actually, that was the straw that kind of broke the camel's back, or actually the nudge that helped me actually let my sub drop, because I was waffling and I was paying for the game and I wasn't playing it just because it was familiar and I couldn't let go. I have trouble letting go of things in general. um, and so, yeah, it's a very, very sad thing. But
I also definitely have trouble letting go of things. I think it's really interesting because one of the biggest questions that gets asked on this podcast, that gets asked in my channel, that happens when I talk to other streamers who haven't gone through a lot of different games, has to do with how do you add variety? What's it like making the transition? So I think it's really interesting to have heard from you kind of what it was like to make that transition from, you know, WoW primarily to still doing a little bit of WoW, but doing ESO primarily, because a lot of people kind of are pigeonholed the other way, where they feel like they want to make that transition. It's what's right for them. It's what's going to make them emotionally happy to help them produce better content, but they don't know how. So I think it's really good to kind of hear somebody who did take that path.
yeah, in my case, it surprised me how much it actually helped my channel. So you never know what could happen if you're gonna, start adding some variety. It felt cheesy to me to do it, but something that helped me was, like, if I wanted to play something other than ESO, I usually just make it a combo stream, and then people might stick around. They're more likely to stick around than they are to like click your channel when you're on a different game that they don't care about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely think that's one way to do it. For me, I've also found that adding a lot of transparency when I go, I love ESO, it's still going to be a primary part of my content, but I need a little salt, a little pepper, like the steak's kind of getting a little dry. Maybe some dating sims are going to be a little like salt here. Maybe we check out Skyrim. That's going to be a little bit of pepper. Maybe we dip our toes into Final Fantasy. Like ESO is my prime game, but I figure I've noticed I've had a lot more traction with people. Not everybody, because there's people who just watch you for one game, and that's perfectly fine. That's very valid. That's their time and how they want to watch. But I think, like you said, either doing the thing you do where you're doing ESO and then go into another game, or being transparent, I think is really important, because I think if people know, like, I'm not abandoning this game, we just need to season it up, because if I don't season it up, I'm going to get very tired of the same meal. And I guess that's kind of the analogy I used. But yeah, and then so to that effect, and that's how I personally stave off burnout, is adding in the seasoning, the salt, the pepper of the different games. I'm curious, because burnout's a very real thing in anything you do too much. I'm curious how you stave off burnout, because if you're playing a lot of an MMO and you burn out and you're just a casual player, your community might be like, oh, we needed you for that raid, but we understand. If you burn out in a game and you're a streamer and it is your job or something you're trying to build to be your job, it's kind of a completely different thing, where it can become even more detrimental, because it's one of those things where you start to like not want to go into the office. So I'm curious what you kind of do to stave off or get through burnout, or just avoid maybe having those feelings of burnout.
I don't know. I get asked that a lot. The best I can come up with, don't do things you don't want to do in the game. Like, there's so much to do in ESO. It's hard to explain with other games. I don't know how I played WoW I seriously was never bored. I don't know how I played that, WoW for that long without ever getting bored. They're like, how have you played this game for a decade and you still like mostly only play this game? I'm like, I don't know. I seriously. But with ESO, for me, is, I would say the way that I'm avoiding that is I'm letting myself enjoy the break away from raiding. I liked raiding. Don't get me wrong. I liked raiding with my family, with my community, with the guild that we had built in WoW. But I'm enjoying my break away from raiding and just doing whatever I feel like doing in ESO at the time, and trying not to give into what I think people expect me to do. Sometimes that's a thing, of course. You're like, you want to entertain people, you want to do something fun, but at the same time, I just try to not let that get to me too much, and like, just whatever sounds fun at the time. But that's my best answer. I know it's probably not a good one.
No, I think it is a perfectly valid answer, because I think that is the thing with burnout, is people go, it's kind of back to like taking chances and making content. That's where making things that's unique in yourself is also how you approach a game. Like you say, taking a break from rating is the thing you want to do. And with ESO having many things to do or other games you can like dip into, being able to do that I think is important, because I think that's the big thing is if people start growing when they're say you start growing in ESO, and what you're doing in ESO that's having you grow is you do a lot of top end trials, you do a lot of prog trials, community trials, that's all you do is trials, and you start to burn out on the game. Some people are like, well, I don't know what the community is going to do if I don't do trials, even in the same game. And I think what you said actually is a really good piece of advice, which is people are going to feel the burnout and feel it. So doing what you want to do, doing what's important to you, even if it's not necessarily what everybody in the community wants to see, ends up being probably the most healthy. Like if you're burning out on one aspect, try a different aspect. If you're burning out on doing only one game, slide in maybe a different game to do that.
Yeah, so I think I like having 2 or 3 games, and even if one of your other games are only once a week, like say, even that is a big help. So my Final Fantasy once a week, and then the rest is pretty much ESO now since I dropped my WoW sub. But then when Valheim comes out, like I'm definitely going to be doing that. So at sometimes I have 2 games I'm rotating, sometimes I have 3. I know people who rotate MMOs when the expansions come out, you know. I think that's a really great way. And if you do that for long enough, community will get used to that and it'll continue to grow and support you.
Yeah, and that's, I think the important thing is time, because when you first try a different game, you're going to drop off all the people who are just there for the one game, and your number's going to go down, and it's going to be scary at first, and it's easy for people after 1 or 2 times to turn away. I mean, when I first started doing podcasts, my numbers dropped significantly, but I kept doing them. People got used to them. People went back and watched them on YouTube, and now it gets the same level of content I get when I do ESO and things like that. And so I think the important part is like, if over a long enough time it's just not working, you might need to reevaluate. But I always say give things like 2 months, 3 months, maybe even 4 months to really get people used to that being part of it. Because honestly, people fear change, and while they might not realize if you do the same thing too long, they will get bored of it. They don't feel bored yet. That's where I think it comes on the stream to be like, well, I know for my own creative ambitions, for me to stay motivated, for me to stay non-burnout, I need to be doing this and be able to like establish it. Because like you said, once you start doing it, it becomes the normal thing you're doing. The community does get used to it over time. So it's just kind of hard to get through that initial phase, I felt.
It is. And I've streamed for over 7 years. And I just got partnered the beginning of this year. Why do I have to look at my partner date? I should know that. So I definitely know that things take time.
For all of those people watching this later on YouTube and who are listening on the audio version of the podcast, my poor puppy had to go outside. So if it seems like an awkward jump cut here, it was just me stepping away momentarily to take the dog out. So we'll continue our interview now. So sorry if it's a little bit of an awkward transition there. So yeah, we've talked a lot about games and consistency, trying new games and your path. And one of the things we've touched on a lot throughout is you streamed for a long time before growing, and like looking at sites like Twitch Tracker and stuff. Yeah, you were averaging for a long time 20, 30, 35 and things like that. And then started to really kind of grow in July of 2020, which looks to be, from what you were saying, around the time you were like moving more to kind of full-time ESO and stuff. So I'm kind of curious what it was like kind of as you were growing, because it seems like once you started growing, it continued just on this upward trajectory.
It was weird because after streaming for so long, after doing something for so long and kind of being stagnant, but not really having other ideas or a desire to change things, you kind of just start to get comfortable. At least I did. And it wasn't bad weird, mind you. It was very surprising and almost surreal because I know a lot of streamers who were partnered somewhere around a year or 2 of streaming. And that was very discouraging for me. People that I know that, I would see that happen for. And I saw that while I was starting to grow, and I'm like, okay, it's fine. We can do this, It's surreal, for real, because I stream because I love to, and obviously because I don't think anybody, I can't imagine anybody doing something for that long without loving it, doing it out of love for it. But I kind of started to feel like I'd always be at that spot. So definitely surreal and pleasantly surprising kind of turn that it took.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to kind of note the turn that it took, because streaming is such an individual journey, and it's a marathon and not a sprint. And as easy it is to say it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's an individual journey. And, you know, as much as you can be fully engrossed with community and things like that, it's hard as people not to, like you said, start comparing yourself to other people. Like they got there, they're faster, or, you know, we both had a similar opportunity, but for some reason they blew up more or less. And it's really kind of can be, like you said, jarring when it's such different speeds, because I know even though I was one of those people who like started streaming and got to my partnership within that kind of like year, because it's hard to know what people come from. I came from a very strong tech background, had a lot of other things kind of coming into it. But at the same time, like even for me, I would also see other amazing streamers like Melzy, who came into it in 3 months. There's the partner badge. And then there's people who are making amazing content who've been doing it like yourself for years, and it took a while. So like, it's very hard. I'm just curious how you kind of battle those inner demons that are like, what am I doing wrong? Or what are they doing better? Or comparing yourself, you know, and kind of getting maybe a negative outlook on the process because it's just not happening at the time.
One thing that helped me a lot is my husband, who often had to remind me why I was streaming. Because when I would start talking about that, he would sometimes bring up, you know, my cousin had told me early on, like, there's a lot of people jumping onto Twitch right now. Like when I started to, there's a huge influx of people. When she started out, she was like one of the only girl gamers like on the internet. Like she was at the right place at the right time. Plus she's amazing, by the way. But she told me that. She said, you're gonna need to be real patient. Whenever I would bring up to her, like, man, you know, what do you think? Any advice? You know, she'd mention that you gotta outlast the surge of people coming in. And, you know, so encouragement from my husband, from my cousin, from other ESO streamers that I was watching zip past me and to partnership. And they'd been streaming for a very short time. Just other people. There were people that had grown a lot more, you know, and then people that were about in the same struggle as me that also helped, that I would talk with, and we'd go into each other's channels and, you know, hype each other up and stuff when doing partner pushes or whatever was going on. So yeah, I mean, I leaned on other people a lot.
And I think that's really great. And because honestly, it does take a support network, be it people you've networked with. And when I say network, I mean network in the form of genuinely reaching out and getting to know people, genuinely be part of their communities and getting to know them without any expectations of them. Because again, like you said, having people who are peers in the same field that you can just kind of chat with is so important. I think sometimes people hear networking and think, how do we collab right away and, you know, grow or whatever? Whereas I think networking truly is what you're describing, which is one, having a support system and a wonderful one in your husband, and two, having people that you could talk to that were peers, you know, like you said, and hype each other up.
Yeah.
The big thing you said that I think is really important here is the outlast part. And the thing about that is a lot of people come in, sometimes they can blow up really fast, or maybe they never do. And even then they can possibly fade out. And if you're trying to do this for a long time, partnership it's an amazing goal. It's an amazing feeling. It opens up doors and opportunities and all those things for sure. But at the same time, it doesn't matter how fast or how slow you get there if getting it kind of becomes the end. So I think what you say about Outlast really matters, because you have to, like you said, your husband will remind you why you're doing this and why you're at it. Because if you keep focusing, working on your content, making sure what you're providing is the best possible, then when the opportunities come, you're still there to take them. Because if you had allowed yourself to maybe get beaten down by it early on in the first few years, you wouldn't have been there when things really started like going up in 2020. And then that leads me to the next thing, really kind of popping off because you were part recently of the World Plays ESO event.
Can you repeat the first part of the question? No, it's not you, it's me.
Basically, I was saying like the Outlast mentality is good because if you had in all those years decided to leave when you were just 30 viewers, then you wouldn't have been there in 2020 when you found ESO, started growing in that field, and then you wouldn't have been there to become part of like stream teams, or most recently being part of the World Plays ESO event. And that's what I kind of want to talk to you next, because like, well, over 2020, you know, you rose up, your numbers went higher, you eventually got to partner, and you were sitting there now averaging 100 plus viewers, sometimes even more tonight. Then with World Plus, you had a lot, like this huge exposure. And I'm just curious, like what that was like. And also like, I think it's a testament to the Outlast mentality. You stuck with it. You kept finding a support network to keep you there. So you were there to grow in ESO, become a stream team member, and then be part of this amazing event that brought so many eyes onto your channel.
It's been amazing. It's been kind of mind-blowing, honestly. It's again with the surreal thing, because you're at something for so long, you get the same result for so long, and then all of a sudden people start to like sort of recognize what you're doing and invite you to things that, you know, help your growth. And I mean, getting onto the ESO stream team was an amazingly huge support, because there's just, you know, people find your channel easier, and people just started, obviously drops are a huge thing, and that's what the World Plays ESO influx was all about. I stream long streams. I've often found I was the only one on with drops, like literally the only one on with drops at times, and so I think that's why I spiked so much. And a lot of those people are just there for the drops. And so when people come in, oh my gosh, your channel blew up, and I'm like, okay, today is not a good, it's not a good test to see how much the channel has grown, because a lot of people are just looking for drops. But you do grow and you do snowball when you get opportunities like that. So I've definitely been so grateful to be a part of the team, and I don't think I'd be partner at this point without it, honestly, just because of where I was at before. Maybe because just the ESO fam is so supportive. You know, ESO fam is so supportive of each other, and I've gotten so many made so many friends that we've just kind of had raid chains and just help support each other. And I never saw that in any, no matter who I rated or hosted or who I chatted in their streams, never ever found anything like it outside of the ESO fam. So I owe a lot to that.
And I like something when I was talking to Map Linear on a former podcast, but I come back to it because it resonates with me, which is the ESO category doesn't have levels. And we talked about it a bit earlier with people of different sizes helping each other out, but that's what it means to kind of not have levels, because you can interact with people on various levels. And as you form genuine relationships, as people who have been there realize, oh, you're putting down roots here. You're not just honeymooning in ESO, you're actually here. You kind of come to be a staple of it. And I think working on the other side of tech, because that's where I was before, here's reputation and brand management for growing tech companies, is while all of the people that were there for drops, all of the hosts and all the stuff you're getting during World Plays, like those numbers might not translate to what your numbers are going forward after World Plays, but it does create brand recognition. Just like when you were growing and had drops on and became part of the stream team, you became a very staple of the category, but also you were there, had all those drops, had all this eyes on you. And that means when people do come back to the category, if they do, they're going to remember that you were there. And I think that's kind of invaluable. And I think that's, again, an amazing thing that you had the opportunity for, and you had that opportunity because, again, you went through all of those years not knowing if it would happen, but you stuck with it, refined your content, and eventually like continued to find your voice in your category. And I think that's the most amazing part of your story to me, is just it's really hard to find people who are willing to kind of stick with being at 30, 35 viewers for years. And it's not a bad thing, because 30, 35 viewers is actually better than almost 99% of the rest of Twitch, but it's still hard when you see, like you said, people passing you to be able to create content on a level that now you've had opportunity after opportunity and really kind of set yourself, up as this like pillar of the ESO community. So I just think that your story is really an amazing one.
You're gonna make me cry.
Sorry.
It's okay. I'm fine. Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
And just a couple things before we move to the Q&A. We like to kind of wrap things up on a little bit of kind of a lighter note. So we do a little bit of a rapid fire. But before that, there's a lot to take from the story. But like, there's a lot of advice out there, don't have your number on when you stream. Like, there's the basic advice. If we look past that, if somebody came to you for advice, or if you had a, back to the future moment where you could just tell your younger self one thing, like what's like a piece of like Tiri advice that you would give?
Oh man. What do I wish I knew? Like when starting out? Is that what I'm answering?
When starting out, when going through the the years before growing, just at any honestly point, just a generalized like kind of a piece of advice that maybe is something unique to you that you could give to someone else.
I guess I would have told myself to stick with it. I mean, I'm glad I did, but I easily couldn't have. Like you said, I wouldn't have experienced all the things I am now, and this is literally my dream. So, being able to work at home and take care of my kids, I mean, it's my dream, and to hang out with all of you guys. So I suppose it's an obvious one when you look at my story, but the advice I would have said was, if you love it, stick with it, but only if you love doing it.
Because you really do have to love it to stick with it.
For that long, yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And just as a kind of a personal aside, as somebody who used to work on the other side of tech and now has only been on the side, I've only been at it for maybe a shorter time, but I always like to kind of throw out, like, obviously you've continued to do things and grow past partner. So that's kind of the last thing. If somebody's on who's a Twitch partner, is like, can you talk a little bit to being a Twitch partner? Because I think sometimes people get so lost in the partner push, their content almost becomes the push to the point that when they get there, they're burnt out in the game, or maybe they're lost with where to go next. And obviously it seems like after you got partnered, you still had this forward momentum. So I'm just curious what, obviously it's a huge thing when you hit that milestone, but obviously that milestone doesn't suddenly like set you up for life. You still have to work, you still have to grow. So I'm just curious what your journey's been like past partnership.
Being partner is the beginning. Becoming partner is, yeah, exactly. You have to be present in order to keep things going and keep that momentum. If you lose the momentum, it can be, I mean, it may not always, but it can be really bad. And depending on how that all works out. But for me, I was like, okay, now I have this badge. I have to prove that I still deserve it every day. That's how I feel about it, because to me, it's a great honor. And I just feel like I'm basically, before I felt like I was pushing for partner, but I think overall I was more just pushing. I don't know how to finish that. More pushing for the right to be here, I guess, like, no, again, proving that I deserve it.
Yeah, that is, I think that is part of it. Like, because getting the partner badge and getting that recognition from Twitch and peers and everybody else is like that huge kind of like feeling. It doesn't maybe change you so much as a person, but it does give you that. It gives a level of validation, and validation is always very rewarding after any length of journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a huge accomplishment. I'm definitely not saying like, don't feel proud of it, like, but work for it continue to, because yeah, it helps growth, just showing that you have that sort of history on Twitch. And yeah, it means a lot. But yeah, you got to keep working at it. Awesome. Above and beyond.
All right, we always end before we move to Q&A, which is a couple rapid fire questions, some that are common to the podcast and the channel, some that are unique to the person. So just kind of stepping forward. Obviously, you have a great affinity with dragons. Which fictional world has the best dragons?
Oh boy. What? You're gonna do this to me? Oh. You're gonna make me pick one? Okay. So I don't think anyone will ever beat Draco from Dragonheart. He's probably always going to be my favorite dragon ever.
Solid call out with Dragonheart. I love that movie. That is a solid call out.
Yeah, Draco was an early build up of why I love dragons so much in my childhood.
All right. As somebody who's played World of Warcraft, has a big history in World of Warcraft, now has a big history in Elder Scrolls Online, looking at two people who are associated with the undead, Molag Bal and the Lich King get in a fight, who wins?
Oh my god. Molag Bal.
Molag Bal, go in with the Daedric Prince. If you had to live in one of the three worlds that you do MMOs in, would you want to live in World of Warcraft? Would you want to live in Elder Scrolls Online or Final Fantasy? Which world would you want to live in with all the goods and bads that come with being part of that world?
That's a tough one. And the fact that like I love ESO the most, like I want to say ESO, but I think it might be a little scarier than Final Fantasy 14. So am I up for it? I'm gonna go with ESO.
You go with ESO. Awesome. All right.
Final answer.
All right. Couple other questions we have to ask. These are the standard ones we ask everybody. You might not be a Pokemon person, so that's fine. But if you had one of every Pokemon or 6 billion lions, who wins?
How can I answer that without being 6 billion lions?
6
How many
billion.
Pokemon are there?
One of each Pokemon. There's about 1,000 some Pokemon right now.
Oh my gosh. Who's going to crucify me if I answer this wrong?
I don't know if
I am
anybody will
not a
crucify
Pokemon person. Probably the Pokemon.
I go with the Pokemon. I still say 6 billion is too much of a number. I don't care how many powers a Pokemon has, but I'm not going to crucify you for it. I'm very alone in my 6 billion lion stance. So I kind of am just seeing if anybody else. The big one.
I will say I wanted to say lions, but like when you see some of the unrealistic moves the Pokemon have, it kind of makes you like, you know what I mean? It was waffling.
Yeah, but how many powers can they use if there's, yeah, but that's
I get it.
Very, very fair point. The all important pizza question. It's a two-parter. One, should pineapple go on pizza?
Indifferent.
Does pineapple ever go on your pizza?
I've eaten it before, but I don't do it on purpose.
Fair.
I'm indifferent though. Like if it's what's there, I'll eat it with no complaints, but I don't go for it if it's like, unless it's one of the only options.
Very, very
Pretty
fair.
Indifferent.
All right. And last two questions. One, Pop-Tarts, are they a ravioli?
What? No.
And finally, if you bake...
Now I have to Google what ravioli is. What's the definition?
I've been through this a lot. Pop-Tarts, if a ravioli has to be a pasta, Pop-Tart is not a pasta because it is a pastry, not a pasta. However, if what makes a ravioli is the crimped edges with a filling in it, then it is a ravioli. That is the debate whether it is the construction or the construction material that makes a true ravioli.
Oh man, is there a real answer? Or is this like an open
there's no
debate
real
on the internet?
These are no real answers.
Sorry.
These literally come from a file that's called the some of these are taken from a file called the 10 hardest questions on the internet. And so the final one from that kind of same document is, if you bake two separate lasagnas, completely different lasagnas, then you take the first lasagna and the second one and you put them together, do you have one or do you have two lasagnas?
So like you're putting them together like a sandwich?
Yeah, you've baked them both. They're separate lasagnas right now. If you don't put them together, you have one lasagna, two lasagnas. You take them out of the pan, and you take one lasagna and you put it on top of the other lasagna. Is that one lasagna or is it two?
Both.
Okay.
It's two lasagnas turned into one.
Fair enough. Yeah, those are the questions.
If I had to choose, If I had to choose, I would say one.
Say one. Most people say one. I'm alone in the two. Thank you, Tiri. Thank you so much for being on Kraken Cast. If you could take a moment, shout out your channel, content, things you have coming up in the near future.
Well, what I would normally say when introducing myself is, hi, I'm Tiri. I play a lot of ESO, and I mostly do housing and overland questing, adventuring. Sometimes we pick flowers and we chat, but we're always chatting. Sometimes we play Final Fantasy 14 every Tuesday. Upcoming Hearth and Home in Valheim is something I'm very excited about, because decorating and crafting. So yeah, we'll see some more Valheim coming up soon.
Yeah, give me any form of fashion and housing, and I'm going to be right back into a game if I haven't played it in a while. So what time can they catch you? Do you have a set schedule that they catch you on Twitch?
I do have a set schedule. I stream a lot of the day Pacific time, starting at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sunday's optional, family stuff.
And for anybody looking for Tiri who is not able to see it on the screen on YouTube, if you're listening to this on audio, that is twitch.tv/TIRINEI to catch it. So once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Tiri. I really appreciate it.